Close the door. This one isn't for children, and you know the story of Snow White. A jealous stepmother, a magic mirror, a poisoned apple, a princess falls asleep, a prince kisses her awake, and they live happily ever after. That's not what happens. Here is what happens. A queen stands in a banquet hall. It is her stepdaughter's wedding day. The guests are laughing. The music is playing, but there is an iron shoe sitting in the fire. It has been heating since dawn. The coals are white. The shoe is glowing red. Servants approach the queen with iron tongs. They grip the shoe and set it on the stone floor before her. Steam curls off it. The guests go silent. The queen is forced to step into the shoe. Then the other one. She dances, not because she wants to, because the shoes are so hot that her body convulses, her legs jerking, her feet searing against the metal. She dances until she collapses. She dances until she dies. At her stepdaughter's wedding, in front of everyone. This is not the Disney movie. This is the real story of Snow White, first published in Germany in 1812 by two brothers who collected the darkest stories ever told to children. Every fairy tale you were told as a child was a lie. If you want to see the real version, subscribe to Once Upon a Lie and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now let's talk about what they cut. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm published Sneewittchen in 1812 in the city of Kassel, Germany, as part of their first edition of Kinder- und Hausmärchen, Children's and Household Tales. That title sounds warm. The book was not warm, and here is the first thing you were never told. In the 1812 first edition, the villain is not Snow White's stepmother. It is her biological mother, her real mother, the woman who gave birth to her. The Grimms changed it to a stepmother in the second edition, published in 1819, because a biological mother trying to murder and eat her own daughter was too disturbing even for early 19th century Germany. But the original text is clear. This is a story about a mother who wants to destroy her own child. It begins in winter. A queen sits by a window with an ebony frame sewing. She pricks her finger. 3 drops of blood fall onto the snow on the windowsill, red on white. She looks at it and says, "I wish I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of this window frame." She gets her wish. A daughter is born, skin white as snow, lips red as blood, hair black as ebony. They name her Snow White. And the queen looks at her daughter and something changes. The queen is beautiful, the most beautiful woman in the kingdom. She owns a magic mirror, and every day she stands before it and asks the same question. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And every day the mirror answers, "You, my queen, are fairest of all," until the day it doesn't. Snow White turns 7 years old. The mirror's answer changes. "You, my queen, are fair, it is true. But Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you. 7 years old, a child." The queen's reaction is immediate. The Grimms write that she turned yellow and green with envy. From that hour on, her heart turned against Snow White, and the hatred grew and grew in her heart until she had no peace day or night. She summons a huntsman. She gives him one order: take the child into the forest and kill her, and bring me back her lungs and her liver as proof. Not her heart. In the Grimm version, it is her lungs and liver. Organs you can cook. Organs you can eat. The huntsman takes Snow White into the woods. He raises his knife. But she is 7 years old, and she begs for her life, and the Grimms write that she was so beautiful that the huntsman took pity on her. He lets her go. He tells her to run. He kills a young boar instead and cuts out its lungs and liver. He brings them to the queen. And this is the detail that Disney could never touch. The queen takes the organs. She believes they belong to her daughter. She has the cook salt them and prepare them, and she eats them. Every bite. She believes she is eating her own child's flesh. The Grimms write it plainly. The cook had to boil them in salt, and the wicked woman ate them and thought she had eaten Snow White's lungs and liver. The queen eats what she believes are her daughter's organs, and she is satisfied. Snow White, meanwhile, is alone in the forest. She's 7 years old. She runs through the trees as night falls. The Grimms describe wild beasts running past her, brushing against her legs, but none of them hurt her. She runs until her feet are raw. She runs until she finds a small house in a clearing. Inside, everything is tiny. 7 small plates on a small table, 7 small cups, 7 small knives and forks, 7 small beds lined up against the wall, each one covered with a white sheet. She is starving. She eats a little bread and vegetables from each plate, drinks a sip of wine from each cup. She's so tired she tries each bed until one fits, and she falls asleep. The 7 dwarfs come home from the mines. In the Grimm's version, they are not cheerful. They are not named. There is no Happy, no Grumpy, no Doc. They are miners who work underground digging for copper and gold. They carry candles. They notice immediately that someone has been in their house. Who has been sitting in my chair? Who has been eating from my plate? Who has been drinking from my cup? They find the girl. They see how young she is. They let her sleep. In the morning, Snow White wakes and tells them her story. They make her a deal. She can stay if she keeps house for them. She cooks and cleans and makes the beds while they dig underground. Every morning before they leave for the mines, they warn her, "Do not let anyone in. Your mother will find out you're here." Her mother, not her stepmother. The original says mother, and the mirror does not lie. The queen stands before it again. Who in this land is fairest of all? And the mirror says, "You, my queen, are fair. It is true." But Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still 1,000 times fairer than you. The queen knows the huntsman lied. She knows her daughter is alive. She knows the organs she ate were not human. And she decides to finish the job herself. This is where the story diverges most sharply from what you think you know. Disney shows 1 murder attempt, the apple. The original has 3. Each one more cunning, more personal, more intimate than the last. And each time the queen makes the journey herself. She does not send an assassin. She goes to kill her daughter with her own hands. The first attempt. The queen disguises herself as an old peddler woman. She paints her face. She dresses in rags. She travels across the mountains to the dwarf's cottage. She knocks on the door and calls out, "Pretty things for sale! Lovely things for sale!" Snow White looks out the window. She sees a harmless old woman with silk ribbons and lace. The dwarf said not to let anyone in, but this woman seems safe. She opens the door. The queen offers to lace her bodice properly. "Come," she says, "let me lace you up for once." She threads the silk laces through Snow White's stays and pulls them tight. Tighter, tighter, until the girl cannot breathe, until her ribs compress against her lungs. Snow White falls to the floor, gasping, her face turning blue, her lips going white. The queen leaves her for dead. She walks out of the cottage and she is satisfied. But the dwarfs come home that evening. They see her on the floor. They see the laces pulled obscenely tight. They cut them. Air rushes back into her lungs. She gasps. She revives. The queen returns to the mirror, and the mirror says, "Snow White still lives." The second attempt. The queen disguises herself again, this time as a different old woman. She crafts a comb from a dark wood and coats its teeth with poison. She makes the journey again. She knocks. She calls out to the girl. Snow White is cautious now. She tells the woman she cannot let anyone in. But the queen holds up the comb. It is beautiful. It catches the light. "Just let me comb your hair," she says. "Just through the window. What harm could it do?" Snow White relents. She leans her head toward the window. The moment the comb touches her scalp, the poison enters her blood. Snow White collapses instantly. She falls to the floor as if struck dead. The queen walks away. The dwarfs come home. They find the comb embedded in her hair. They pull it out carefully, tooth by tooth. The colour returns to her face. She revives again. The queen returns to the mirror. Snow White still lives. The third attempt, the apple. This is the one you know, but not the way you know it. The queen locks herself in a secret chamber. She's not just a queen in this version. She's a woman who has studied witchcraft, who knows poison, who understands the art of killing. She takes a beautiful apple, half red and half white, and she poisons only the red half. The white half she leaves clean. Looking at it, you would never know. It is perfect. She disguises herself as a farmer's wife. She makes the journey one more time. She knocks on the cottage door. Snow White is afraid now. She says, "I'm not allowed to let anyone in. The 7 dwarfs have forbidden it." The queen holds up the apple. She does not push. She says, "Are you afraid of poison? Look. I'll cut the apple in half. You eat the red half. I'll eat the white." She cuts it. She bites into the white half. She chews. She swallows. See? Snow White watches the old woman eat. The apple looks so beautiful. The red half is so red it seems to glow. She reaches out. She takes it. She bites. The piece of poisoned apple lodges in her throat. She falls down dead. The queen walks home. She stands before the mirror. Who is the fairest? You, my queen, are the fairest of all. For the first time since her daughter turned 7 years old, the mirror gives the answer the queen wants to hear. The Grimm's right. Then her envious heart had rest, as well as an envious heart can have rest. Even in victory there is no peace. The dwarfs come home, they try everything. They unlace her bodice, they comb her hair, they wash her with water and wine. Nothing works. She does not wake up, and they lay her out on a table and sit around her and weep. They weep for 3 days. She does not decay. Her skin stays white as snow. Her cheeks stay red as blood. Her hair stays black as ebony. She looks as if she is sleeping. The dwarfs cannot bear to put her in the dark ground, so they build a coffin made of glass, clear on all sides so she can be seen from every angle. They write her name on it in gold letters. They carry it to the top of a mountain and set it down and post a watch. One dwarf is always beside her, always. The animals mourn her too. The Grimms write that first an owl came, then a raven, then a dove. They sit beside the glass coffin and grieve for a girl they cannot help. Years pass. Snow White does not change. And here is the part they really don't want you to know. How she wakes up. In Disney, a prince kisses her. Love breaks the spell. It is gentle. It is romantic. In the Grimm's version, there is no kiss. There is no spell to break. Snow White has a piece of poisoned apple lodged in her throat, and she has been lying in a glass coffin, unchanged, for what appears to be years. A prince rides through the forest. He sees the coffin on the mountain. He sees the girl inside. He is, the Grimms write, so struck by her beauty that he cannot turn away. He begs the dwarves to give him the coffin. He says, "Let me have it as a gift. I cannot live without seeing Snow White." He says he will treasure it, honour it above all things in the world. He does not know her. She has never spoken to him. He has never heard her voice. He is in love with a body in a glass box. The dwarfs refuse at first, but the prince is insistent. He offers gold. He pleads. He is a prince. Eventually they relent. They take pity on him. His servants lift the coffin to carry it away. One of them stumbles on a tree root. The jolt shakes the coffin. The piece of poisoned apple dislodges from Snow White's throat. She opens her eyes. She sits up. She lifts the glass lid. "Good heavens," she says. "Where am I?" That is how she wakes. Not a kiss. Not true love. A stumble. A piece of fruit knocked loose by a servant tripping over a root. The prince tells her he loves her more than anything in the world. He has known her for approximately 90 seconds. She agrees to marry him. The wedding is the final scene, and it is the scene I began with. The queen, Snow White's mother, is invited. She does not know who the bride is. She stands before her mirror one last time. Who is the fairest? The young queen, the mirror answers. Snow White. The queen is terrified. But she goes. She has to see. Curiosity is stronger than fear. It has always been her weakness. When she arrives at the wedding, the iron shoes are waiting. They have been heating in the fire since before dawn. Servants lift them with tongs and set them before her. She's forced to step into them. She dances. Her feet burn. Her body jerks. The wedding guests watch. Snow White watches. The prince watches. She dances until she drops dead. The Grimm's original text says it plainly. She had to put on the red-hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead. That is the ending. A mother tortured to death at her own daughter's wedding while the guests look on. A punishment so grotesque that it functions not as justice but as ritual, as spectacle, as something older and darker than a fairy tale. Now, let's talk about what they erased. The Grimms themselves were the first to sanitize this story. Between the first edition of 1812 and the second edition of 1819, they made one change that rewrites the entire meaning of the tale. They turned the biological mother into a stepmother. In 7 years, the story went from a daughter destroyed by her own mother's jealousy to a daughter destroyed by a replacement wife's jealousy. The horror became containable. It could happen in other families, not yours, not a real mother, never a real mother. But the 1812 text is explicit. The queen who asks the mirror, the queen who orders the killing, the queen who eats the lungs and liver, the queen who laces the bodice and poisons the comb and crafts the apple, the queen who dances in iron shoes until she dies, is the girl's biological mother. The Grimms knew what they had. Their own annotations, the Anmakungen they published alongside their tales, document variant versions from across German-speaking Europe. They knew this motif was ancient, a mother's jealousy of her own daughter's youth and beauty. They preserved it faithfully in the first edition. Then, as the book became popular, as it found its way into nurseries, they flinched. This was not the only change. Over 7 editions from 1812 to 1857, the Grimms systematically softened their entire collection. Mothers became stepmothers. Sexual references vanished. Christian morality was woven into stories that had originally been pagan. The tales did not become gentler because the originals were gentle. They became gentler because the Grimms discovered that parents were reading them to children and the originals were causing nightmares. Snow White is not an anomaly. The Grimm's collection is full of stories that would horrify the audience Disney raised. In The Juniper Tree, a stepmother murders a boy by slamming a heavy lid on his neck, decapitating him. She chops his body into pieces, cooks him into a blood pudding, and serves it to his father. The father eats every bite and says, "Give me more. None of you shall have any of it. It is as if it were all mine." In The Robber Bridegroom, a girl hides behind a barrel and watches her fiancé and his gang drag a maiden into their den, strip her naked, chop her body on a table, and salt the pieces to eat later. A severed finger with a gold ring flies through the air and lands in the hidden girl's lap. In Hansel and Gretel, a mother convinces a father to abandon his children in the woods because there is not enough food. The children find a witch who fattens them for slaughter. Abandonment, cannibalism, dismemberment, mothers and fathers devouring their own children or consenting to their destruction. These are not isolated horrors. They are the Grimm's entire project. The brothers collected what ordinary German people were telling each other in the dark, and what they were telling each other was that the world eats its young. Disney didn't just flinch, Disney performed surgery. The 1937 film keeps the stepmother, the mirror, and the apple. It removes the cannibalism. It removes the 3 murder attempts. It removes the Queen's knowledge of witchcraft. It removes the iron shoes. It removes the stumble that wakes Snow White and replaces it with a kiss. The kiss is not in any version of this story before 1937. Disney invented it. They needed a moment of tenderness. They needed love to be the cure. They needed the prince to do something heroic instead of being a man who falls in love with a corpse in a glass box. Every child who has seen that film believes love's first kiss breaks the spell. It never did. A servant tripped. But there is another layer beneath the Grimms. Older versions that prove this story was circulating centuries before 2 German brothers wrote it down. In 1634, nearly 200 years before the Grimms, Giambattista Basile published a story called The Young Slave in his collection L'Occulto degli Conti, published in Naples. A girl is cursed by a fairy and placed in a glass coffin at the age of 7. Her uncle keeps the coffin in a locked room. His wife finds it, becomes consumed with jealousy at the girl's beauty, smashes the coffin open, and drags the girl out by her hair. She beats her, she cuts her hair, she enslaves her, she forces her to work as a servant. Glass coffin. A beautiful girl. Female jealousy triggered by beauty. Cruelty as punishment for existing. The bones of Snow White. 178 years before the Grimms, and then there are the real women. In 1994, a German historian named Eckhard Zander published a book called Schneewittchen, Märchen oder Wahrheit, Snow White, Fairy Tale or Truth. He argued that the story was based on Margaret von Waldeck, a German countess born in 1533. Margaret was famous for her beauty. Her stepmother, Katharina of Hatzfeld, resented her and sent her away from home. Margaret moved to Brussels and later to the court of Philip II of Spain. She died in 1554 at the age of 21, almost certainly by poisoning. Historians believe she was assassinated because her romance with Philip threatened political alliances. The region where Margaret grew up, Waldeck in northern Hesse, had copper mines. The miners who worked them were often children, some as young as 12. The labour was brutal. The tunnels were narrow. Their growth was stunted by malnutrition and the physical toll of the work. The locals called them dwarfs. A beautiful girl, a cruel stepmother, poisoning. Dwarfs in the mines. The parallels are not proof, but they are not coincidence either. There is another candidate, Maria Sophia von Erthal, born in 1729 in Lohr am Main, in the Spessart region of Bavaria. Her father, Philipp Christoph von Erthal, was a local nobleman. After her mother died, he remarried. His second wife, Claudia Elisabeth von Reichenstein, was cruel to Maria Sophia, favouring her own children from a previous marriage. Lohr am Main had a mirror-making factory, the Gemeinsche Spiegelmanufaktur. Philipp Christoph von Erthal owned one of its products, a talking mirror. It still exists. You can see it today in the Spessart Museum in Lohr am Main. It is a mirror with an acoustic peculiarity, a reflective backing that causes it to produce a faint echo when you speak into it. A mirror that talks back. And the 7 dwarves? There are 7 mountains surrounding Lohr am Main, and within those mountains were 7 mines. A cruel stepmother. A mirror that talks. 7 mines. A girl who suffered. The Grimms collected their stories from oral sources across Germany. They did not invent them. They transcribed what people had been telling each other for generations, and what people had been telling each other, it turns out, may have been the lives of real women, broken down into symbols and repeated until the names were forgotten, and only the horror remained. Now pull back, look at the whole picture. A mother who cannot tolerate her daughter's beauty, a girl who is punished for growing up, a queen who would rather eat her child's organs than share the mirror's approval, a girl who is killed 3 times and still survives, only to be placed in a glass box for men to admire, a prince who falls in love with a body he has never spoken to, a woman tortured to death at a wedding. This story is not about a magic apple. It is about what happens when a woman's entire worth is measured by her appearance, and another woman's worth depends on being the most beautiful of all. The mirror is not magic. The mirror is the world. It tells you where you rank, and when it tells you someone younger has taken your place, it drives you to madness. The Grimms understood this. That is why the story opens with the queen pricking her finger. Blood on snow, red on white. The very colours that define Snow White's beauty are born from her mother's pain. The daughter's beauty is inseparable from the mother's wound. And the cannibalism. A mother eating what she believes are her daughter's organs. This is not random grotesquerie. Fairy tale scholars have documented the cannibalism motif across centuries of European folklore. It appears in story after story, culture after culture. The older generation devouring the younger one. Adults consuming children, literally and figuratively. Parents eating what they created. It is the darkest metaphor these stories contain, and it is everywhere. Snow White survives the bodice. She survives the comb, she survives the apple, she survives the glass coffin, but she does not save herself. She's saved by dwarfs who unlace her, by dwarfs who pull out the comb, by a servant who trips on a root. She never fights back, she never runs, she never refuses the woman who keeps coming to kill her. 3 times the queen appears in disguise. 3 times Snow White opens the door. Because the story was never about her power. It was about her endurance. In a world where beauty is the only currency a woman holds, Snow White's survival strategy is to be so beautiful that someone will always intervene. The dwarfs protect her. The prince claims her. Her beauty is her shield and her prison and the very thing that sentences her mother to death. The iron shoes are the final image. A woman forced to dance in burning metal until her body gives out. Not executed quietly, not banished, made to perform her own destruction at a wedding. In front of the daughter she tried to kill, in front of the guests who once called her the fairest of all. That is not justice. That is the story telling us something about the cost of this competition. The mother and daughter are trapped in the same system. One is rising, one is falling. The mirror makes sure they both know it. And the story punishes the loser not with death, but with spectacle. Disney gave you a kiss and a song and a happy ending. The Grimms gave you a mother eating her daughter's lungs.